Hello and welcome to the Triathlon podcast. We're brought to you every week that the recording software works by our sponsors, raceforce.co.uk, oxygenaddict.com and myprotein.com. Helen Murray, how are you, mate? We finally managed to get this darn thing recording.
We love the technical gremlins, don't we?
Do you know, I love that it's free, but I'd pay to make it work more consistently. I don't change anything. It works 1 minute, it doesn't work the next minute. Why does it happen, Hels?
Oh, it's just, I don't know. It's having maybe it's to do with, is it Blue Monday or something? Maybe it's to do with that.
I think today is Blue Monday. I think a year ago today, I went to the boss's office and said, "Do you know what, boss? I've had enough." Maybe my computer feels the same way.
I think this is it. I think it
is. It's the third week back. Yeah, this was the one. It's a year to the day since I had a confirmed I'm going.
Was this the tipping point?
It was the straw that broke the donkey's back. Yeah, it absolutely was.
Wow.
This was in fact, I think it was a Tuesday. I think if I remember, the class in question were a Tuesday class.
I nearly had a meltdown on Friday at work. It was too manic, and I nearly ended up in tears. And I said, "Look, this is just bonkers."
Yeah, mate, that was me. Yeah, I was in tears in the boss's office. Don't think I can handle this anymore, boss.
No, and then I think I was told, "Oh, you worry too much. You worry too much." Yes, I worry too much.
That's a real sensitive way to deal with somebody who's emotionally under pressure, isn't it? To tell them you worry too much. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
that's a real help.
Yeah, but it's all right. We got through it, and then it was the weekend. It was fine.
There you go. And we had some lovely snow as well. Did you get out and play in the snow this weekend?
I must admit, I didn't. I ended up, some kind person gave me a date in the conservatory. And it wasn't just a date with my turbo. It was a date with my husband on his turbo too.
Els, I've yet to see a confirmed photograph of you both. I saw the photos of the bike set up in the conservatory. Very impressive. Not of you actually both sweating and grinding it out, as it were.
Sounds so wrong.
It does, doesn't it?
There is a photo. It's just
you have to get it on the new Instagram account.
Oh, does anyone really want to see me on a turbo? I don't think so.
Well, how about you just let's start easy. Let's break the public in easy with a photo of the two bikes side by side in the conservatory to show that you're getting the work done this winter.
Oh, honestly, it was...
Does anybody Instagram? What is an Instagram? Is that what we do? Do we post pictures and people go, "That's cool, here's another picture back"?
Well, I've put one up already of our peanut butter ingredients, but we can talk about that in a moment.
I'm excited. So we've now got an Instagram account for the show. What is it, Helen? What's the address thing?
Have a guess.
At Cup of Tri?
Yeah, well done.
Nice.
Keeping it simple.
I've literally never been on Instagram. That's how over the hill I am. Now count.
Yeah, so we have one, Cup of Tri, and I don't know, there will be photos over the course of the year.
Got no idea what we're going to do with it, have we?
No, but we now have an Instagram account, so that must do something good. Yeah.
Got it. Response to your sudden emergence as one of the premier graphic designers in Cheshire, seemingly from nowhere, you produced that magnificent "Matt Dixon's been talking about this, and this," and everybody we know went, "That's really good." And you went, "Yeah, shut up." And I was like, "No, that's really good." So if anyone's looking for a graphic designer, Helen's your girl.
It
was ace.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I had a go at doing an infographic and it seemed to work. So I might make it I'll try and do the odd one here and there, put it that way.
Yeah, that'd be a cross to bear if you say, "I'll do it every week."
I'm not.
No, kill me now.
No, that won't be happening. But I will attempt to do the odd one here and there because it was quite fun to do, to have a little play. Yeah.
Stuff.
And it's on our Twitter feed now, isn't it? So at Cup of Tri. And if you scroll back through a few tweets, then it should be up there. It was about summarising some of the key points about Matt Dixon and recovery, because we spoke to him last week and basically he said you need to sleep, you need to eat properly, and in the easy sessions, that is why they're called easy.
That's right. Go easy when it's easy, go hard when it's hard, and don't let the two meet in the middle. That's the answer, isn't it?
Exactly. So yeah.
That was a good answer. That was a good interview. We got a lot of love on Twitter and Facebook and stuff about that, and I think rightly so, because he's a man who knows his onions, isn't he?
That's it. And it was just really useful as well. And I think everybody who would have listened to it, you can actually apply nearly everything he said to yourself.
Yeah.
And that, so it makes it more relevant, doesn't it? And yeah, it was really, really good. And
I'd highly recommend people checking out his website, purplepatchfitness.com, because there's loads of really, really good stuff on there. And I was looking at it going, I've got to raise my game, man. This guy's the gold standard. He's got some really good stuff on here. So I love it when there's people like him who are very knowledgeable and they give loads of stuff away for free, because it's how people learn, isn't it, in this day and age? So good on you, Matt Dixon.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for coming on. It was brilliant. Now, Rob, so I was in my conservatory on Saturday on the turbo, and that was fine. But I got some rather exciting news from you about a triathlon that you've actually entered.
I know, you kept it quiet last week, didn't you? Because you were like, come on, we have to tell people. And I was like, just hold on a little bit.
Oh,
so yeah, we got loads of abuse just before Christmas, and we made the deal. If people phoned in, then I'd enter, and I'm in. I'm in the Triathlon X. I'm officially entered, and I was super, super excited. And then I got my rejection email through today from the Fred Whitten, which I was planning to do as one of my big rides in the build-up. So I was like, oh man, I'm really going to have to struggle to find something to do now.
Oh.
So I'm on the reserve list for the Fred Whitten, so hopefully something will come up there.
Okay. So just explain, right?
Pretty gutted.
How horrendously horrible is... I don't mean horrible because clearly it'll be stunning in terms of views and in terms of a challenge, but just talk us through how mad is Triathlon X?
It is your standard Ironman swim taking place in Windermere,
okay.
3.8k, and then the bike course, which is pretty special, is the bike course of the Fred Whitten Sportive, which is itself 112 miles and takes in something like 3,500 meters of climbing. So what's that? 11, 12, 13,000 feet, something like that. So 6 big mountain passes, and then the run is absolutely spectacular as well. And I think it's even better than last year when it was Wasdale X, because this year it's like a 3-section run. You've got an 8-mile section on the relatively rolling hills of the valley going up to Dungeon Gill.
Okay.
And then you've got an 8-mile up and down of Scarfell Pike, which is obviously the highest mountain in the country.
Yep.
Then 8 miles back again the same way you came out, and it goes down past Easdale Tarn, and it's just the most beautiful run.
Just on very screwed legs.
Yeah, could well be.
The most beautiful run, but you're going to be crawling.
I told you, didn't I, when I ran up Arthur's Seat on New Year's Day, I came down, and after about 2 minutes of running down that, my legs cramped up. And I was thinking, well, I know it's flat in about half a mile after Arthur's Seat, but if I'm on Scarfell Pike, I've got about another 3 miles of downhill to go at this point.
Oh, I mean, I walked up it, 2 years ago, and I had never been up Scarfell before. And I don't know, it actually surprised me quite how hard it was.
Yeah. It's a proper day out. I'm not thinking about it as a race. I'm thinking about it as a long catered workout in the Lake District. It'll be the most stunning thing ever.
Yeah.
So if anyone's sitting on the fence, you can't be as out of shape as me right now. Get yourself entered. Come and play with us. It'll be good fun.
It's all I can say is chapeau and hats off, and well done for actually pressing enter. It took a while.
It did, I know. But you've got to get all your ducks in a row. You've got to. When you're a 43-year-old guy, you've got to have significant social pressure to do something that's stupid, and it's important to get everyone on board in the background. Make sure Mrs. W's happy with it, and so it's all ducks are in the row. We're good to go now. It's going to be great.
Amazing, and I think Joe Skipper's been trying to set you up for a bit of a challenge as well.
Yeah, well, of all the people in the world do you need giving you a hard time, right?
Go on, what's he said? What's he said?
He said something like I think the initial challenge was try and beat my time on the Fred Whitten from when I was young and crap. like, like that's any kind of payback to me. Which is, and I checked it out later, and it was one of the fastest times of the day that he rode. So it's, Joe, there's no way. So I said to him, like, give me an hour. We'll have a handicap. I'll get within an hour of your time. And then I guess he's got a mate who was talking about entering Triathlon X, and him and his boys are trying to badger this mate of his to enter by giving him abuse. And what was it? Paul Hayward, I think this guy's name is. And boy, I tell you what, you don't want to be in Joe Skipper's training group because he's hard on his mates, man. I can't read out half the stuff he's written on Twitter.
Well, there we go. So there's a good challenge ahead then, Rob, for 2016.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And I'll tell you who else is racing as well. Someone else who we want to get on the show is Carl Alexander.
Yes, he is, isn't he? He's doing Triathlon X.
He tweeted to say, I'm going to be there as well. See you there. And I was thinking...
Yeah, he might be.
Not unless you'll see me when you're on the way back across the lake from the swim, maybe. But that's about the only time you're going to see me. Maybe if I'm on the run by the time you've finished. But otherwise, no, you won't see me. Let's disavow that myth right away. Oh, we ain't going to be racing, mate.
Just at registration. Hello.
Yeah, have a chat there.
Bye.
I was wondering, I wonder if we can work out a way. There's got to be some way to have some kind of system. I can do some live recording on the course.
Oh, as if it's going to be, as if you're even going to think about wanting to do that.
I know, but if I plan it in advance, there's got to be a way. I bet if you use an iPhone and a little headset thingy, there's got to be a way you can do it.
It's really easy to be able to record yourself, but I don't think that's going to be your number one thought when you're going up near Dungeon Guild.
No, it's got to be done. Like, if we're going to go and do this big thing, we've got to turn it into a piece of like internet. It's going to be worth the few extra minutes it'll take me fumbling with the MP3 player to make some little recordings while we're out there.
Oh, but it's really easy to do. I'll show you.
Okay. We need a way I can do it so I don't have to take my hands off the handlebars going up those 1 in 3 climbs.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's all good.
Good luck.
It's all good.
Good luck. Good luck.
Yeah, we're going to need it. Better go and do a bike ride tomorrow, eh?
Yeah. Might help. Might help.
Right, so you're on the turbo. I'm in the church praying. Hope all our listeners are out there doing lots of training as well. We've not got a huge amount by way of race news this week, have we? What with there having been no races at all since we last spoke?
Well, the only one that I can tell you about was Mercury Man that Rachel Joyce went and did on her way back from Pucon. So in the Cayman Islands in the Caribbean, right? And I've looked at the website and it looks ridiculously beautiful. So just picture the gorgeous scenes of snowy England and or snowy Wales or snowy Scotland, and then sort of the complete opposite out in the Caribbean, crystal clear turquoise waters and a half Ironman event. So yeah, she won it. Basically, that's all you need to know.
That's the way to do it. If you're Rachel Joyce, race your way out there and race your way home again and go and race in the Caribbean. That's brilliant.
Looks stunning. So that was one thing. Other things I've seen around is that apparently there's going to be a 70.3 in China for 2016. So that'll be the first time that the Ironman have actually gone into the Chinese market. And
well, no, because they had Ironman China a few years ago. They had it on for like 2 or even maybe 3 years. And it was so hot, everybody melted.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Like they had the original Ironman China, and who won it? I think Olaf Sebastius won it one year. The guy who runs that training camp we went to last year in Oasis in Coraleo. Yeah. And also Rasmus Henning won it. And the year Rasmus Henning won it, he was so far ahead. It was like 40 odd degrees in the sun on race day. And you've got to go back on YouTube and try and find it, because like he stops under a motorway bridge and has a lie down for like 20 minutes because it's so hot.
Seriously?
He's like an hour ahead of the nearest competitor, and he's just like, man. And he walks half the marathon just because he figures like, I've got such a big lead, I may as well burn some of it and not kill myself.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, they had a really crazy sort of a swim in a place where there was loads of current, and some guys swam really quick and other guys hardly made it out of the water, and it was deadly. Oh my goodness. Well, it's Ironman 70.3 Hefe. I'm not sure. Hefe. I don't. That'll do. Close enough. If you can't pronounce it, nobody can.
So it's going to be their second 70.3 race in China in 2016. Also, rumour of an Ironman event in Hamburg. Watch this space on that one, I think.
Really?
Yeah, just watch this space. And then the other thing I saw is that I think are you going to be speaking to her over the next couple of weeks? Corinne Abraham is going to be doing Dubai 70.3, apparently.
Yeah, God bless her. Corinne was on the phone for like 20 minutes with me on Skype as I tried to get the damn software to record the interview, and it just wouldn't do it that day. So she thinks I'm the biggest amateur of amateurs in the world, and we tried to reschedule it for hopefully next week. So fingers crossed that should be coming out in the next few weeks.
Okay, well, hopefully, because so Brett Sutton basically tweeted saying that back in training and having fitness test, coach's assessment, you're going to Ironman 70.3 Dubai, girl. Which therefore would suggest that, hey, if Brett Sutton says you're doing it, you're doing it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is she with him now then?
Yes.
Oh, didn't know that.
Yeah.
I know that she'd moved teams, but I hadn't put two and two together. What's the team called? Do you know? Is it that Pewag team?
Oh, this is right. I think so. I think she has moved team, as you said, but
she was with BMC, wasn't she?
Yeah, but she was still working with but she's been with Brett Sutton for a little while now.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, cool. Oh, good. Good knowledge, Helen.
There we go.
It's so hard to keep up with it, isn't it?
Yes, there are many people to try to keep across. So, yeah, it is pretty difficult. But, hey, we're getting there. We're getting there, Rob.
Well, hopefully we do get an interview with her. We'll be able to ask all these questions that we've got lined up.
Yeah, totally.
Fingers crossed. And we should probably give a shout out to the sponsors, raceforce.co.uk at this point, as we're in the old racing section. You can, of course, get a discount off their products. You get 10% off all race tours, training weekends, and bike transport services, excluding Bike Bus Standard, as it's so cheap already at £185. You offer payment plans so athletes can secure the booking for just £100. Hells, the next thing on our list we've got to tell people about is their new training and racing Recce weekends for favourite event of yours and mine,
Slateman. Yeah, and Snowdonia Triathlon, which was the Snowman. They've switched that, haven't they? So they're going to be...
I prefer the name Snowdonia Triathlon. I think it's a snowman made me always think, I'm not flipping entering that. It sounds freezing.
Snowman made me think, no, I've been to like Capel Curig in the middle of summer when it's freezing. October, it's not going to be fun. Well, Shabbat went there on an outdoor ed thing at school, and there was snow on top. No thanks. So anyway, they've switched that now, haven't they, to the summer, and it's a Snowdonia Triathlon. So raceforce.co.uk are going to be doing training recce weekends. They're also going to be doing an Ironman Barcelona training weekend based around the 70.3 being held there in May. They're going to do the Yorkshire Tour de France route, which is 2 days of coached cycling. And they're going to have like a training weekend for Ironman Wales and like the long course weekend. And you can do any or all of the distances across the weekend with the Raceforce team.
Fandabidosi. So the Snowdonia weekend is 29th of April. The Barcelona training weekend is the 20th of May, which I think is the same weekend 70.3 Barcelona's on. So they based it around there. Yorkshire Tour de France training weekend 27th of May, and long course women's weekend 8th of July. There we go.
Rob, at this point, I'm also going to give a shout out to something which was flagged up to me by Susie Richards, who, we've just mentioned it there, previous winner of Slateman and Snowman, actually. And now she set up, with her boyfriend, something called Top Flaps, right? Now, this is nothing dodgy. This is such a brilliant idea. You know when you go out on a club ride in the winter?
Yeah.
And first of all, you just get the annoying person who doesn't have mud guards. That's bad enough, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Then you get on the wheel of someone who does have a mud guard. However, their mud guard is pretty useless, and you get a load of yuck in your face and all over yourself, right? So they've designed flaps which fit on the end of the rear mud guard to basically keep road spray out of your face, and you can put a club logo on it. And they originally did it for their cycling club, and they were raising a bit of money for charity as well. But then I think they got so much good feedback that they've decided to start a little business adventure. So if you are in a triathlon club and the mudguards is a bit of an issue, or you just go out riding with your friends on a club ride, then really do check out www.topflaps.co.uk, or you can email them info@topflaps.co.uk.
I'm on the website now, and their catchphrase is "Top Flaps, keeping grit out of teeth." I love that. Because mudguards aren't enough. You need one of these things hanging down at the back. They look awesome. I'm getting some.
They look cool, don't they?
I'm getting some made for Team Oxygen Addict. They are brilliant. And I tell you what, we'll get some for Nuts for Tri Club as well.
That's it.
They are absolutely brilliant.
It's such a simple idea, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
So check them out. www.topflaps.co.uk.
And I've got to say, she is one of the nicest people I've met in triathlon. I sat and had a coffee with her and Lucy and Joe Skipper the day before Ironman UK.
Yeah.
And I remember walking away from the conversation thinking, she's really, really, really nice. Yeah. Amongst a whole bunch of nice people, she stood out as being really nice. So
there you go.
Good. We should get her on the show and interview her as well, actually, shouldn't we?
I think we should.
We should indeed.
Yeah. Anyway, you've done an interview this week, though, Rob. Not with Susie this time, but.
Awesome interview this week. We have got with a break from tradition. We're moving away, I think, possibly for the first time away from English and British people.
We did have Reto Hoog on.
We had Reto Hoog on one of the early ones, didn't we? As the show is growing, we're managing to attract people from outside the sphere of just the UK, and this is a guy who we were turned on to by Joe Skipper, telling us about when he raced out in Ironman Texas. So we've got an interview coming up with a chap called Lionel Sanders. He's Canadian, does a lot of his racing in Canada and the USA. And he's got a brilliant story. He recently was the winner of Ironman Arizona in sub 8 hours. So 7:58 is, one of a very select few crew of people to ever go under 8 hours. But what makes his story doubly amazing, I think, is he was a complete non-swimmer when he started, and he's taken forever to manage to pull his swimming together. So we talk quite a lot about how he managed to actually go from being a non-swimmer all the way to, now he's probably a second pack swimmer, swimming sort of low 50s. So yeah. He's not up there with the real pros yet, but he's certainly improving really, really quickly. The second thing that makes his story really amazing is that following his time in high school, when he was a good sort of high school level runner, he ended up partying a lot at university, drinking a lot, and ended up in the drug scene, and ended up for a couple of years as really, really difficult drugs and alcohol problem. So to hear his story of coming back from that and entering an Ironman as his way of kind of pulling himself together out of the depths of drug addiction and giving himself something to shoot for, really great story. I'm not going to spoil it any more hells. We're going to go straight over to our interview with Lionel Sanders. Hi there. We're very, very happy to have Lionel Sanders on the show, all the way over from freezing cold Canada. So listen, mate, thank you very much for being on the show. How are you doing today?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. I'm on my day off. I've done 8 days hard, and now I got a day off. So, this is the best day of the week, I guess.
Cool. And it's funny, I was sitting here feeling sorry for myself because it's just got cold here in the last few days, and I was thinking, I've just been out for a mountain bike ride and my hands were all frozen. And I'm talking to you and thinking, actually, maybe we don't have it so bad here in England at the moment. So for the benefit of the listeners, what's the weather like where you are right now?
It's about negative 12 Celsius here right now. And I live in I'm in the tropics of Canada. So, I really don't have the Canadian perspective very well either. But I'm not doing any exercise outside. My exercise is walking to the car and, getting the ice off the windshield, and that's it. And other than that, I'm doing all indoor training.
I think it's only been sort of negative 10 once in my lifetime in this country about 4 or 5 years ago. And I remember going out for a run and feeling as though my nostril hairs were actually frozen. So how do you manage to train when the weather's like that over there?
Yeah, it's really not, I wouldn't really recommend anyone training in it other than if you just, you like doing crazy things, because from a training standpoint, it's not good training at all. So it's actually the reason I do most of my training year round indoors. And it's actually the reason how I got into that. It was just brutally cold out, and I was running on a downhill section one time it was covered in ice, and I kind of bowed my leg inwards, and I had like a bursal sac inflammation. It lasted for like 6 months after that, and I decided after that run, that's it. I'm never running outside in the winter ever again. And that's how I got into running on the treadmill, and ever since then, I fell in love with the treadmill. It's such great quality running. It pushes you, all these things. And so that really was this kind of crappy weather that started that.
Wow. So listen, let's I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's go back and let's go through your story of how you first got into triathlon. So from what I've read, you were a runner in high school and in college, right? You were a fairly decent standard runner.
Yeah, I got into running in grade 4. And I remember it very well. In grade 3, the coolest guy in the world was this guy named Jason Hernandez, and he won all the running races. And I thought to myself, I want to be just like Jay Hernandez. And so starting in grade 4, I tried to go about doing that. And very quickly, I got into running and started to do it at the highest levels that were available to me at that time. And I was into all of the sports, but running was the one I definitely gravitated to and probably excelled at the most. But interestingly, because I grew up in a small town, and as time went on, it was when I got into high school. This is when it really started. Like, I was sort of expected to run. Like, it was already known that I would be running for the high school, and I don't know. This kind of resentment started to build inside of me, and I started to actually not enjoy running anymore. I just kind of did it because I felt obligated to, and all my running performances kind of declined from then onwards. And I never really got truly into running, I would say, until I was about 22 years old.
Oh, right, okay. So were you a sort of track and cross country runner when you were at high school and in college then?
Yeah, I definitely did both of them, and I'd say my favorite sport though was basketball, and that's the one that I put all my energy and focus into. But that was probably the one that I excelled at. I did not excel very much at basketball. I just enjoyed playing it.
And so what led you into triathlon then? Obviously, you've got a decent motor in there from all the running that you've done as a kid. Talk us through your first entry into triathlon it would have been 2010, right?
Yeah, my first one was in 2010. What happened is I got into, it actually all kind of started around the same time in early high school. As I began sort of detaching from athletics, I started to party, and I started to drink and smoke marijuana. And I got progressively more and more into that and less into athletics as time went on. And then I got into university, and I was out on my own, so I didn't have anyone to tell me what to do. And then I started to try harder drugs like cocaine, for instance, and I just went down that pathway, progressively further and further. And after 2 years of university, my grades had fallen to the point where I was not failing, but I was very close to it. And I actually woke up in a detox once at the end of a summer, and I had no idea how I had arrived there. And my parents at that point, obviously sensed there was something wrong, and so they started to look into they had given me a student loan, so they looked into what I was spending it on, and they realized I was spending it on drugs and stuff, and so then eventually they took my student loan away, so I couldn't go back to university. So I continued on down that path for another 2 years, except I'm not in school anymore. I'm just kind of living in a basement, working online, just making enough money to party and to pay my rent, and then eventually I didn't pay my rent either, and I just went down that pathway progressively more and more. And in my deepest, darkest days, I was having suicidal thoughts, and I was having audio and visual hallucinations, and it just was like I had just terrible self-esteem, and I had lost 20, 30 pounds, and it just was not a good existence for me. I remember, for instance, waking up in the morning and staring at the roof and just going back to sleep, and waking up and staring at the roof and going back to sleep, and eventually I would just cry because I felt like I had no reason to get out of bed. And yeah, eventually those feelings and that stuff, led me to say, what the heck are you doing, man? Like, this is the life that you want to live. And it was right around that time that I stopped doing drugs. I said, I'm not going to do drugs anymore. And for strangely, I went to do a run. I hadn't run in several years. I said, you know what, I'm going to go for a run. And that was November 5th, 2009. And so I started running. I just gave myself to running. I ran every single day for a month, and I still felt like crap. And I don't know where it came from, but the idea to do an Ironman triathlon popped into my head. And
that's a pretty brutal detox routine you put yourself through there.
And it's super weird because, like, I have no recollection of triathlon whatsoever. Like, even though, like, Canada has a great history in triathlon, like Simon Whitfield winning the first Olympic gold medal, for instance. I didn't have any awareness of that, probably mainly because I just wasn't really into athletics, truly at that time. And so it's really strange. I still wonder where the heck that idea came from. But so I got that idea, and I had to Google what an Ironman triathlon entails. And I mean, obviously I found out, and I thought, hey, this could actually help me turn my life around. Like, it's something really, really hard. It'll give me an excuse not to party, and it'll give me discipline and motivation. And so eventually I entered in the race, and for the next 10 months, I entered in Ironman Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky, and so I spent the next 10 months basically devoting myself to training for that triathlon. And I saved up money to buy a bike, and I got a gym membership, and I realized that I suck at swimming, for instance, and so I had to go about improving that. So I did my first triathlon in May of 2010, and I think I came out of the water almost last place, not quite last, but close. And that was the journey. The journey had begun, and eventually I went to Ironman Louisville, and it was by far the hardest thing I'd ever done in my entire life up until that point. But that's where it all began, and it was interesting actually in that race because a guy named Paul Ambrose from Australia ended up winning the race, and he lapped me on the run course. I think I was at maybe like 10 miles, and he was at 20 miles, something like that. And I thought it was absolutely amazing that someone was going that fast, that deep into the race. And I think that's kind of where the seed was planted that I was going to try and become a professional triathlete. And as I said, the swim was the weakness, and so then basically, the next, up until now, I've still been trying to improve my swimming, but it all began right there in Louisville.
So that really it's a pretty amazing story of redemption, isn't it, really? And I think a lot of people listening are going to be able to relate to that idea of Ironman is such a massive challenge that it's almost like you can't help but try and reorder your life in several distinct ways in order to try and get yourself together to even be able to consider starting to train for it, let alone being able to consider actually finishing it, right?
I'm probably a bit biased, but I do believe it's a spiritual journey, and I do believe there's no way you can do an Ironman and not change you deep inside of you and at your core. And I think that's the beauty, and I think that's why so many people are drawn to Ironman and just long distance races in general. It's just you shed all of that unnecessary ego and all that kind of stuff, and you really kind of find out what matters and what's important. And health obviously is one of those big things, and mental not solitude, but mental clarity and centeredness. Those are all important things to leading a well-rounded life.
It's incredible. Hey, so listen, your first Ironman Louisville, you were 10 hours 21. Is that right from memory?
I'm a numbers junkie, so I think I have pretty close to the exact number, 10:14:31.
Oh, very good. I'm impressed, man.
Yeah.
So 10:14. So you've obviously, you've got some natural talent there. That big engine from the running history is there, and you've obviously done the hard work to get there. But you're still a long way from. I mean, 10:21 is a decent number, but it's a long way from realistically making it as a pro, isn't it? You're probably 2.5 hours away from the win at that point. Can you sort of talk us through how you've then gone from lopping sort of 2.5 hours off your Ironman time over the next 4 years?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had this kind of reflection after Ironman Arizona this past. It was in November, and there I ended up going 7:58. So yeah, it's like 2 hours and 15 minutes or so faster. And quite frankly, if you had asked me at Ironman Louisville, could you have gone? Will you ever go an hour faster? I would have said to you, absolutely not. That's physically impossible for me to do. But it's one of those things, once you get into it and you start to learn, the swim has been the biggest area I would say that I've really devoted to improving, and I have. It's been very slow and steady, but I've more and more I'm amassing sort of the appropriate ways to train and what matters to make a good open water swimmer, and so the swim was always the one that I had to focus on, just because I was always losing the race in the swim. And so, I mean, slowly but surely in that race, I think I swam 1 hour and 15 minutes. And in comparison to Ironman Arizona, I swam 54 minutes. So that was a big piece of the puzzle. And also, as you improve your swim, you become more part of the race.
Of course.
Someone said one time, a minute in the water is 3 minutes at the finish line, and I do believe there is some sort of phenomenon that's happening like that. Like you're a little bit closer out of the water for some reason. The race dynamics and that sort of thing just they get into you better, and for some reason you just end up finishing better at the end. So that was a big piece, and then the bike. I would say I probably had a bit of background in my bike too, because I rode BMX, like I rode it as a mode of transportation all as I was a kid, and I lived, kind of about 5 kilometers away from the main little city center, and I would travel there all the time by bike. So I had a bit of experience in that regard, but I had no idea about aerodynamics, hydration, nutritional things that all take place on the bike. As well as how to train properly for biking or for running in general, really, for anything in general. I had no ideas of the scientific basis of training. And over the next 3-4 years, all those areas I just became more knowledgeable about. And I mean, I'd say the biggest thing that led to improvements was a more scientific approach to training, like improving my VO2 max, improving my lactate threshold, like actually doing concentrated work at those outputs. So that was a big piece. And then also, of course, the aerodynamics on the bike. In Louisville, for instance, I was riding like an aluminum bike with no thought to aerodynamics whatsoever. I think I wore loose clothing and just a regular helmet, round bottles, absolutely no thought to position, anything like that. And as time went on, I got onto better equipment, and it's one of those things, especially in the pro ranks too, which I find interesting is, until you actually have a good race, it's difficult to get good equipment, and so it's one of those. Of course, it's kind of one of those things. Like once you do good, once you've already proven that you're good, you almost become like untouchable in a sense, because suddenly now you get put on all the best equipment and stuff, and it really elevates you. So it's that triathlon's one of those sports that, to make it into that rank is very challenging, because unless you have a ton of money or something, you sort of are at a disadvantage from an equipment standpoint. But
now, you mentioned earlier that you do a lot of your training indoors, especially through the winter. It must be 4 or 5 months pretty much continuously indoors, and that fascinates me, because I'm a big believer in the benefits of the turbo trainer and the hard work indoors in the winter. Not necessarily that old idea that you've got to go outside all through the winter and do long, slow miles. And I've always believed that you can turn that on its head and do the really hard quality work in the winter. And then as the weather gets nicer, kind of go outside and you're already faster. You've got more power and you get more bang for your buck outside. Has that been your experience then?
Yeah, 100%. I do. I would say I do. Other than the month that I went to Kona, I did train outside for that month. Other than that, I've been training indoors exclusively for the last 2 years. And
really, like completely exclusively.
Completely exclusively, and it's a great deal of it is for that very reason that the turbo trainer is you can't get a better bike workout than on the turbo trainer. Like, where are you going to go and do? Unless you have your own little private track or something, it's very difficult to do 3-minuters, 8-minuters at VO2 max, 30 minutes at lactate threshold, and not have to slow down or focus on getting, not getting hit by a car and all.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was another piece of the puzzle too. I got hit by a car 4 times. I've been hit by cars 4 times, in which one of them I woke up in the back of an ambulance strapped to a board with my front teeth knocked out. So, I mean, I used to train outside, but I think the motorists have made me have scarred me a little bit, and so there's that piece. I don't want to die riding a bike. There's that piece, but there's also the piece that I believe turbo trainer and a treadmill. I think the treadmill is exactly equivalent to the turbo trainer. They're both just as good, if not better, than training outside than the work you can do outside. I think you can really force yourself to do even higher quality work inside in a controlled environment than you can outside, with all the variables.
Yeah. Hey, listen, let's talk a little bit more about your training in terms of, I think people listening, loads of people will have this sort of the secret desire within them to think, if I had the time and dedicated the time to it, I'd love to have a go at becoming a professional. If only I knew what it takes. So let's talk a little bit about what it's taken for you to go from 10 hours 14 at Arizona, at Louisville, all the way through to 7:58 at Arizona and winning that this year. How many hours a week would you say you're putting in, and how many times you're swimming and biking and running in order to make that improvement over a 5-year, 6-year period?
I mean, it's all changed as I've learned more and more. And I mean, initially I just trained, and that got me to a certain level. Like, I had no thought given to the science or anything. I'd go to the pool, I'd swim, I'd go out on the bike for 2.5 hours, and I'd go run for 10, 20 kilometers. And that was my idea of training, just kind of doing mileage.
Yeah.
And that got me, a little ways. And then the big thing for me in the swim anyway is I wanted to swim in this particular swim team. And I went the first day, and I couldn't even keep up in the slowest lane, slowest pace. Couldn't even remotely keep up. And so I said to the coach, like, what do I have to do to be able to swim here? And he said, you got to be able to swim 130 per 100 meters. And I said, like, for how long? And he's like, you just got to be able to swim 130 per 100 meters. I said, like, for a kilometer? And he said, all right, sure, for a kilometer. And so I went away, and it took me, a good year to be able to swim a 130, so 15 minutes for the kilometer. And I went back, and I still couldn't keep up whatsoever. And that's when I realized that he meant you need to be able to swim 130 all the time, continuously. And with no, that would be easy. And so that became, I guess, my motivation for the swim practice. And so for the swim, it's I still don't really know the answer to the swim, but I would say a great deal of it has been time in the water, as I guess as disheartening as that might be at times. You think of guys like Andy Potts, for instance, who swam 1508 or something for 1500 long course. I mean, he started swimming at a very young age, and he swam probably 50 plus kilometers a week for his entire childhood. And the fact of the matter is, I just have not done that. And so, of course, you have to give some thought to the proper technique, like a good, nice early vertical forearm, and sort of that arm, keeping that arm perpendicular to the bottom of the pool. And there's a few other things, but a great deal of the swim improvement, I think, has come from I've just swam. I've just spent 5 years now swimming, and how
many times a week do you swim?
I swim every single day. I take 1 day off a week, or 1 day off actually. I work in 10-day blocks, so I do 7 hard days, and then I do a day easy, a day off, a day easy, and then I repeat that whole process. And
gotcha.
So the mileage in the swim has changed over time too. You know, for a while I tried low volume, and another while I tried really high volume. And where I'm at in my thoughts now in that regard is, if you want to swim, if you didn't start swimming as a youngster and you're sort of an adult onset swimmer, if you want to get into that sort of 52 minute Ironman swim kind of level, you're definitely going to have to be putting in 30 kilometers a week, I would say. It's just you can't get the work done and the muscular developments that you want to have without swimming that kind of a volume. So that's kind of where my thoughts are at on the swim.
I remember Gordo Byrne used to say that he reckoned it took him 1 million meters a year for every minute he took off his Ironman swim once he reached the 55-minute point. So he was swimming consistent 25 to 30k weeks every week of the year for a year, and he'd take a minute off the Ironman time at the end of it.
I agree with that 100%, and I think it's consistency is the biggest piece. Like, it's sustained 25, 30k a week after week. But also inside of that, doing the right training, doing some high-end stuff, doing some lactate threshold stuff, doing some technical stuff, you know what I mean? Not just going there and swimming continuously for 4K or whatever. There certainly is an element that you need that proper training prescription to inside of the 30 kilometers.
It's almost like you've just got to get in the pool and get swimming before you worry about actually what you do, isn't it, I think?
The swim, it's not, running and those sorts of things, they're just not the same, the approach to them just can't be the same. And the approach to them can't be the same for someone who started swimming as a youngster versus someone who started swimming at, like myself, 22 years old. My flexibility is just not like it would be if I was 7, and I don't have the time to be swimming 70, 80 kilometers a week like some of the high-end distance swimmers would be swimming. And so it's been an interesting journey in the water. But yeah.
So listen, let's talk about what you consider to be your 3 best results this year. I was looking at your blog here earlier on. You've had your win at Ironman Arizona. You've had Ironman Mont Tremblant, if I've pronounced that correctly.
That's close. Yeah, that's good. Tremblant.
Close enough.
Yeah.
And then you've got your Oceanside 70.3 result. Now, I want to start with the Oceanside 70.3 because there's a great photograph here of you running side by side with Jan Frodeno, and a great story about how you had his poster up on the wall to inspire you when you first started this journey. Tell us about Oceanside, man.
Yeah, that's the highlight of my career up until this point. That was to put it into perspective. So about, I want to say 10 months previous, I did St. George 70.3. It was the North American Pro Championship, and it was my first time racing against like the very best: Jan Frodeno, Sebastian Kienle, who was the reigning world champion at that time. And I'm a competitive guy. I went into that race thinking, all right, I want to duke it with these guys. I want to be up in the front. And, long story short, I was 18th place, 10 minutes behind Jan Frodeno, who ended up winning the race. And so it was like the most humbling experience I ever had in my life. And it was a very powerful experience for me. And so I knew I had my work cut out for me, and it took a lot of hard work for another 10 months. But Oceanside was sort of like my next real shot at trying to duke it out truly in the front with these guys. And the one thing I really had worked on over the winter was my biking, and I really I got on a better bike, and I got higher end equipment, and I also I had a better approach to how to train properly for the bike. So I knew for me I was going to have to ride basically as hard as I possibly could for 90 kilometers if I had any shot at duking out with those guys. And so sadly I came out of the water close to 5 minutes down actually. And that was a bit of a disappointment, but I got onto the bike and I stayed positive, and I biked as absolutely hard as I could. I think I actually did my best 1 hour power I've ever done in the first hour of that race.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, in all honesty, I did. And the part I regret a little bit is the way I did it, because, I would much rather hold a steady power, but I was just like an animal let out of a cage. I had spent, 4 months indoors, no racing, no nothing. And it was my first time riding in that kind of an environment. I smashed every time out of a corner. It was like a sprint. I was smashed every single time. I tried to get that average absolutely as high as I could. And finally, at about 37 miles, I ended up catching the lead group. And I had said to Erin, my fiance, before the race, I said, if I catch them, because it'll be the first time I ever caught the high-end guys, I'm going to go by them so hard they're never going to forget the time I caught them. And that's what I did. And I held about over 500 watts for close to 2 minutes as I went by. And that was also a major mistake. In the end, I know that. But anyways, so I ended up coming off the bike, and Jan Frodeno had ended up bridging the gap again, because I'd say a big piece of the puzzle was I'm a very poor technical rider due to doing all my riding inside, and it's very technical in the final few kilometers, and so he took back quite a bit of the minute or so I had gained in that next 20 miles. And so we came off the bike together, and yeah, that's the moment of my life right there, man. It was all of a sudden Jan Frodeno and I are running side by side, and we're bumping elbows, and I cut him off coming around a corner, and he cut me off, and we're like, oh, sorry. And one time we come to the aid station, he had the inside line and grabbed the cup and handed it to me, and I was like, oh my God, this is it. My life is complete.
Wow, what a good guy. What a good thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And but that's when I came to the realization that this dude is like, there's a reason this guy's the world champion, and his ability to suffer was much greater than mine. And so I ended up getting dropped, and he ended up winning the race, and I crashed and burned and finished third. And but it was the moment of my life, and everything I'm doing now is to relive that moment and to go hopefully deeper than 5 kilometers into that run the next time.
Yeah. And let's talk about Ironman Arizona, because this is relatively fresh, isn't it? This is November of 2015, which, I mean, man, it must have been pretty close to exactly 6 years. Did you say it was 5th of November you decided, that's it, I'm giving up the drink and drugs and I'm going for a run for the first time?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it was about 6 years, 6 years and 10 days, really.
Wow, look at that. And then there you are, crossing the finish line, 7:58. Let's talk through that day.
Yeah, that was, I mean, this whole year, well, 2015 was it was the year that I was going to focus on Ironman. I had done 70.3s in all of 2014, and I felt like I had a good sense of how to prepare for a 70.3. But the Ironman, I really didn't know what I was doing. I did Ironman Florida at the end of 2014, and the swim got canceled, and it was really cold, and so a lot of the factors that go into an Ironman weren't there. And so, yeah, 2015 was the year that I was going to learn about the Ironman, and it was quite a rocky start in Ironman Texas. I did, I'd say I blew up pretty hardcore on the run, and that was a very, a learning experience from hydration and nutrition in the heat standpoint. And then
now, was that the race you and Joe Skipper were riding together?
Yeah, we worked together on the bike, and eventually he dropped me though, so we didn't work together the whole time, sadly, and it just got worse from there, from my standpoint. But
I remember him saying it was brutally hot and humid that day, right? He couldn't believe how hot and humid it was.
I had never exercised in those kinds of conditions, and I didn't appreciate that the body just, like, if you don't have acclimation and you don't, like, for instance, I was taking in a bottle an hour, so 750 milliliters, and it turns out after I learned this, I was sweating at over 2 liters an hour. So, you do the math. After 3 hours on the bike, I was already down 6 pounds of my body weight. And by the end of the bike, I'm 8 pounds. And by the end of the race, I was probably 15 pounds, dehydrated. And you just don't perform well with that kind of dehydration. So
you got your money's worth in the med tent afterwards, I'd imagine, with that, did you?
Well, my feet were blue after, so that was like
really?
Never had seen that before. Yeah, but no, I never went to the medical tent. My mom's a nurse, and she was at the finish line. I was like, should I go to the medical tent? And she's like, no, you'll be all right. Just eat these potato chips and drink this Gatorade, and you'll be all right. And so that's what I did. But anyways, so yeah, it was long story short, it was a trying year, and so to go to Arizona, and I felt like when I got there, I felt like, okay, I've learned a lot of lessons this year, and all I want to do in this race is to just show the lessons that I've learned and execute a good race. And so, yeah, the swim set me up really well. I swam, I ended up making, I'd say, probably the second pack. There was a few, kind of like a smaller pack out front, and then some guys, like Brent McMahon, right in the lead. But I'd say I made the second pack for probably the first time in my career, and that kind of set things up nicely. And then I knew I wasn't going to be able to bike too well just because of the training that I had done leading into it. I think I did a lot of overtraining, and so I had some fatigue. So I knew my best bet was to pound the first 100K or so, and as I crashed and burned, hopefully I'd have enough time that I'd come off the bike in a decent situation. And so that's what I did, and that's what happened. But I did end up coming off the bike in third place. I think I was about 15 minutes down to Andrew Starkowicz. And I've raced Andrew quite a few times in the past. So, I mean, I certainly hadn't thrown in the towel, but I knew that was a long way. That was a lot of time to make up. And so, but anyways, I stayed positive and I went to work. And yeah, I ended up entering the lead at 18 miles. And then at that time, I saw Brent McMahon, fellow Canadian, who was he was making time up now on me, and I was starting to have these stomach issues and having to go into the portage on, and I really never knew who was going to win that race until the very end. And so yeah, but it was a really great experience to come down the finish line and to finally truly have basically accomplished the goal that I set out to achieve back in Louisville almost 6 years prior, and that was to win a professional Ironman race with the swim. And so yeah, it was an experience I'll never forget.
Nice. And that's going to give you a lot of confidence going forward now that the swimming's getting to the point where you can make that second pack and you're not losing as much time. And obviously you're such a good biker that if you can limit your losses on the swim, then that's going to give you a lot of confidence going forward. So talk us through your plans for the coming year. What, in an ideal world, how's it going to play out for you over this coming year?
I mean, the biggest thing I'd say, actually the biggest lesson I learned all year was from a training standpoint. And I was doing a lot of training this year at race pace. In fact, I did my best bike rides. I did 12 4-hour rides in practice that were all better power outputs than my Ironman Arizona bike, for instance. And that can only, you can't sustain that. It's bad training, like, in my opinion. And I think it negatively impacted my racing. So
sure.
A great deal of what my changes will be made is I'm definitely practicing a more polarized approach to training, and not spending as much time at race pace and that sort of thing. And so I think I've already seen in just the last 2 months some definite improvements on the bike and the run from that standpoint. So from a performance standpoint, I just want to continue to learn the lessons that are to be learned. I've not been doing this that long. This will be my third pro season. I think I have a good sense of how to prepare for the 70.3, and so I'll be looking to do well at the 70.3. I'm going to do Panama 70.3, which is I think it's the Pan American Pro Championship on January 31st. So
okay,
I definitely I feel confident in the 70.3 that I'm starting to be able to compete on the very front end. So I'll do that race, and I'll do St. George 70.3, which is also the North American Pro Championship. And I was even thinking about maybe coming over to Europe and doing the European Pro Championship. So for the 70.3, I mean, I definitely feel like I want to be duking it up in the front to win one of those races. The Ironman, on the other hand, Arizona was good, but it's still one of those. It wasn't that hot, for instance. And so there's still lots of factors. It was a wetsuit legal swim. And so there's still lots of things I think that I need to experience and learn how to race under those conditions to truly in my own head feel that I'm starting to understand the Ironman. So that will just be another thing that I'll be working on. And of course I want to go to Kona and improve upon. I was 14th this year, and I definitely will be looking to improve upon that performance come October.
Oh, awesome. Well, listen, man, thank you for taking the time to join us on the show. It's been really interesting speaking to you. We wish you all the best for your race. It's only a couple of weeks away now, and by the time this goes out, it might even be race week itself. So we'll be watching the results there with great interest. And what an inspiring interview, man, to go from to go from where you came from, hitting rock bottom, all the way through to winning yourself an Ironman Pro Championship. It's been great listening to your story.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Listen, I hope to get you over to Europe sometime soon, and if you manage to get over and race either Ironman UK or one of the 70.3s here, come and hook up with a cup of Tri podcast, and we'll have a good chat, mate.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate it. Take care.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, there's our interview, Hells.
Rob, I came across Lionel Sanders' story probably about a year ago, and I'd read a few stories about him. And do you ever watch the ITU races on TV? I should hope you do, actually. Anyway, one of the commentators is called Barry Shepley, who's Canadian, and he's from the same town as Lionel Sanders.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and he's really, really supported him. So that's probably how I first came about hearing. And yeah, he's really supported him, and it's just such an incredible story. And it would be really interesting, wouldn't it, if Lionel Sanders were to, go and give talks to perhaps other young people in a similar situation to the one that he found himself in, in his early to mid-20s, and just sort of say, look, actually, you can get out of it. Because I know that he definitely talks of wanting to sort of take his own life at one point because everything was that bad. And so to have turned it around and to be at the World Championships in Kona and to be such an Uber biker and all that kind of thing and just really get his life back on track is pretty amazing.
And I think he represents a certain truth in a lot of even age groupers who are taking part in triathlon, in that a lot of us have got issues around some kind of addiction, and we're substituting one addiction for a more positive addiction. And no one's going to argue that you haven't got more work to do in the long term, but I love the way he talks about his Ironman being a spiritual journey towards being like a better person. It was the kind of, I have to do this to get away from the bad things that are happening, and completing an Ironman, I think, represents that for a lot of people the first time they go to try and race it. So loved his story, and probably you won't find a better story of, the absolute depths of rock bottom of crack cocaine addiction all the way through to going sub 8 hours. I mean, it's an enormous achievement to go sub 8 hours. But when you think that 5 years ago he'd never even taken part in a triathlon, let alone, raced an Ironman, I think he's a really good guy, and I'm really rooting for him. And something we didn't touch on in the interview, largely because we didn't have time, because I knew he was willing to talk about it, was he was caught up in this whole thing in Kona this year. Do you remember where Matt Chabot swam in front of him to try and help him through the swim?
Yep.
And got embroiled in all kinds of controversy, and the thing that kind of made the mark of the kid, I think, he went to the race referees afterwards and asked to be disqualified, and said, I was under the impression that this was going to be all right, and everybody's up in arms about it. I've clearly done the wrong thing. Here's my race number, kind of thing. And it was that the head race judge who said to him, no, look, you don't need to do this. I think he finished 13th, did he, or 14th overall? So you don't need to be disqualified over it. Just you broke more than slightly the spirit of the law, I suppose. But I mean, I don't know. It's such a weird line, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Somebody who's a better swimmer than you agreeing to swim in front of you.
I know, and then it is. Yeah,
it's not like it's like it's drafting on the bike. It's different. Isn't it?
I'd say it is different because you've. I think it is different, and there is obviously. I mean, you're allowed to do it. That's the thing. You are allowed to draft in the water. So, if they wanted to stop that, well, then they'd have to bring in new rules, wouldn't they? I tell you, it's
good guy though, and I hope the next year brings a lot of success for him. Obviously, he's going to do more 70.3 racing next year than the full-on Ironman stuff he said, but he could be a real contender over the 70.3 distance, I think, for world champion.
Oh yeah, totally. He competed a couple of years ago at the World Champs, I think, and he did. What did he do? I'm just pulling it up now. 2014, he was fourth in 3:46 at the 70.3 World Champs. So yeah, this is it. He's really got the speed, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love that kind of never say die attitude of I got on the bike and I rode as hard as I possibly could until I caught people up, and then I had a little breather, and then I rode as hard as I possibly could as well to try and get away from these guys. And you just think it's great that somebody's racing completely fearless.
Yeah.
He's got, no worries about what's going on. If I explode, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
That's it. He has he will have been through so much.
Yeah.
That
the perspective that gives you on, well, I'm having a bad race.
Exactly.
I mean,
really?
Talk about not taking yourself too seriously.
No, I'm on a bike. I'm doing something I love, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Honestly, really, really. That was a brilliant interview. Fascinating guy. And all the best for 2016 and beyond, I'd say.
Absolutely. And next week, what have we got interviews coming up wise? Let me just grab the old interview sheet. Over the next few weeks, we have got an interview, hopefully, with Corinne Abraham. We've got an interview with Eric Min, the CEO of Zwift, and actually, as well as being CEO, I didn't realize this, he's the guy who originally sat down and coded the program himself.
Oh my goodness.
He wrote it himself as like a thing to keep his mind off the boredom of the turbo trainer. And then everybody on Slow Twitch was like, that looks so cool. Where do we pay? And he was like, I might be onto something here. So really looking forward to interviewing him. We've got an interview with, hopefully, Asker Jørkendrup, the famous sports scientist who's involved with a large number of sort of nutritional companies, isn't he? Power Bar and Gatorade and things like that. Yeah. So hoping to pick his brain.
That'd be really, really interesting.
Yeah, Mark Blackburn, the race director from Triathlon X. We're hoping to get him on to talk a little bit about what on earth I've got myself into.
Can't wait.
And we're also going to have, I don't know yet whether it's going to be a Magical Mystery Tour, but I'm going to take the old recorder to Fuerteventura in a few weeks for the training camp and try and get some interesting interviews with, firstly, with the age groupers who are out there with us.
Yeah.
But a little friend of mine came back from Fuerteventura yesterday, and he was swimming next to Mr. Gomez, who's staying out there for a few weeks. So,
like I said, though, Rob, by the time you get there, he'll have gone.
Well, fingers crossed. There's going to be somebody there who's a pro, though.
Yeah, no.
So here's a warning now. Anyone in Fuerte who looks even vaguely pro, I'm going to be chasing you around with an MP3 recorder.
Love it. Love it. You're going to have a great time. Rob, before we go this week, you know how Matt Dixon was telling us last week about the importance of fueling after every session?
Yeah.
Well, I like to share a little bit of a recipe now and again. So one that I found by David Dunn, who is a performance nutritionist. He works with Team Wiggins, Harlequins Rugby, British Canoeing, and his brother is actually a very, very handy golfer. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Anyway, So he does, it's like a cinnamon and raisin oat bread. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, some of the things that Matt Dixon told us to eat last week were yogurt, didn't he? Yeah. Yogurt and nuts and things like that. So this recipe is 300 grams of oats, 500 grams of Greek yogurt. So basically that's about a tub. Pumpkin seeds, dried raisins, ground cinnamon, a little bit of baking soda, some flaxseed, and a little pinch of salt. Basically mix it all together, whack it in the oven 45 minutes at 190. And there you go.
And that's it.
That is
it's as easy as that.
So easy. I just made one before. It takes 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes, and it is yummy. And David Dunn said it's a really good sort of post-workout snack. So there you go. It saves going to go and get something rubbish from the corner shop, which you don't really want.
Does sound very, very delicious.
So I will put that up on our feed for sure.
Good. I'm looking forward to more infographics from Helen's Infographics Workshop.
We'll try. Yeah, we'll try.
It's all good. Right. I guess we should tie it up, shouldn't we?
I think so. I think it's back to the pool, early doors tomorrow. Can't wait. I genuinely, that was said in a very sarcastic voice.
It was, actually.
Yeah, I genuinely quite like swimming at the moment, so I'm more than happy to go back to the pool first thing in the morning. And big day on, as this is coming out, isn't it, Rob? That big day of the launch of Team Oxygen Addict is happening right about now.
It is. So this is going to go live midnight Tuesday.
Yeah.
The beta launch opens 7 a.m. Wednesday morning. So, yeah, but I guess by the time people are listening to this, the doors will have been opened, and hopefully Team Oxygen Addict beta test group will be open and people will be joining. Who knows, it might even be closed. We might have had our 20 members and it's all closed up by this point. So fingers crossed. We just don't know how it's going to go, Hells. It's a real jump into the dark, this.
It's exciting. But basically, I guess the website would be a good place to go though as well, wouldn't it? You'll have the latest stuff up there, won't you? Whatever happens.
Yeah, well, yeah, basically we've got some pages prepared for it to go up, and if it's still open, it'll say open. The page is oxygenaddict.com/team. And if some of the slots are still available, you'll be able to just sign up and put your details in there. If they're not, there'll be some instructions about what we're going to do. Is we're going to sort of get 20 people in and run them through for a few weeks to make sure it all works, and then in February we're going to open up for the proper official launch when we make sure everything's actually not going to fall apart. Because crikey, I can't even get the damn podcast to record, so God knows what's actually going to happen. You won't believe the number of workflows and email autoresponders and software to process the credit card thing, and everything's going to work together, and it's like, well, what if this happens and what if that happens? And so yeah, it's the first step into the business world rather than doing it on a one-to-one basis with people. So hopefully if it all goes smoothly, and we think it will, we did 6 trial runs today before we got it to actually work. So close the doors down, get everyone in for a couple of weeks, and then sort of beginning of February we'll open it up again for real and have people in. And the plan is to open it for athletes, more than just Ironman athletes as well, half Iron, sprint and Olympic. But maybe I'm starting to run before I can walk.
Wow. Hey, see how it goes. You never know. Watch this space. So that's all at oxygenaddict.com /team. If you want more about the podcast, oxygenaddict.com /podcast. We're on Twitter @CupOfTry, and we're on Facebook /CupOfTry. And yeah, please get in touch with us. Again, we love hearing from you, so keep it coming. And if you do want to check out more about Lionel Sanders, who was our interview of the week this week, you can go to lsanderstry.com.
That's cool. And one last thing, thanks very much for our patrons who've signed up to support us. We've had another couple sign up over the last week. One of them is Alex Lawton, who you'll remember from episode 8, was it, or 9, I think. He's a really great guy, and you should go back and listen to the interview with him. So thanks very much for supporting the show. We really appreciate it. If you guys want to sign up and support us as a patron, all the details are available on the podcast page. Just click on the sidebar at the right and it gives you the options and tells you what's up. But we really appreciate you guys for doing that for us. And if you can leave us a review on iTunes if you get a chance, that'd be brilliant as well. I think that's it, Hells.
I think that is it. Right, Rob, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. I'm going for a run.
Right now?
Yeah.
Seriously?
I've been working since about 7 this morning.
Oh.
It's now
9 p.m.
9 o'clock. Yeah, I've pulled a good shift today.
I love it. So you're going with a head torch?
Yeah, get the head torch on. A new head torch for Christmas from Mrs. W.
Brilliant.
Go out and get a bit of exercise and try and unwind. Put some hours in this last couple of weeks getting ready for this launch, I tell you.
That is perfect. Just before we go, what's the latest you've ever been for a run?
I ran up a mountain after midnight when I worked in America.
Okay.
So it was a post midnight run, which was beyond awesome, and I can highly recommend it to anybody.
And what about the earliest that you've got up to go for a run?
4:30.
Yeah, similar. I think I've done that before. Yeah. And when I was
early enough.
Yeah, I was working lots of late shifts last summer, and I was running back to my hotel at midnight after work. Hey, we get it done, don't we?
Lots of people do. I coach a guy who works out in the Middle East, and he's in army type activity, and he's up at 4:30 every day. Does his 2 hours before 6:30, does his shift, gets in bed and is asleep at 8. And he's like, it's no big deal. I still get 8 hours, more than some nights. And it's just the dedication of people blows me away sometimes.
Yeah.
for the younger and fitter than I, that's for sure.
Anyway, we best shut up, Rob.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks for listening, everyone. I have been Coach Rob Wilby.
And I'm Helen Murray.
You've been listening to the Cup of Triathlon podcast. Until next week, have a great training and racing week, and we'll speak to you again soon. Cheers now.